tell me a brief summary of your exposure to this material, backing up as far as you need to go. I know you spent time in Iraq. You went to Babylon. Maybe back up just prior to that. How did you get interested in the Anunnaki before you landed as a soldier? And I think you were Sergeant First Class or Staff Sergeant at the time.
Sergeant First Class.
Yeah, so that's a pretty high enlisted rank too. So you're leading people at that level in your career if you're a Sergeant First Class.
That's true.
So what you were looking at and what you were able to talk about might have been two very different things. So back up just a little bit and tell me how you got started on the idea of even the Anunnaki at all before you got to Iraq. When did that start?
Yeah, absolutely. It started probably when I was 8 or 10 years old, being told in Sunday school the story about Noah's Ark. That was probably 1975, 1976, and I had just come back from watching the King Kong remake movie, and I saw this big gorilla in this oil tanker, and I thought, wow, okay, Noah's Ark, 2 of everything in the boat, and then there's a biggest ship right there. It's a steel ship. Noah had a wooden ship, so there's no way. I knew at 10 years old, there's no way that the Noah's Ark story was true as it was told. There had to be something else in it. There had to be some other reasons or some explanations as to validate that he put 2 of everything in an ark to survive. I was pondering that question for many, many years.
And did it occur to you that maybe geographically that not 2 of everything existed in that region? And how would you go out all over the world and get 2 of every kind? I mean, that in and of itself is like.
I knew that he couldn't get probably 2 raccoons where I was living at in New Hampshire. They were everywhere, but that was in the Middle East.
I had the same kind of thoughts when I was young. Isn't that funny? So you saw this. Well, it brings up an interesting question. And we'll get to this, but according to Mauro Bellino, every Hebrew text was borrowed from the Sumerian documents, and they all know this at the very highest levels of the Vatican, okay? They just failed to tell the Protestants and the Christians and everybody that came after them that, by the way, this was a story that was borrowed and changed significantly. So in that changing significantly, especially in the Hebrew Torah, which are the first 5 books of the Bible or the Old Testament, right? Is it possible that they made all these mistakes, like the plurality in Genesis 1:26, the ludicrous story about Noah's Ark, without introducing the idea that maybe there was some genetic sampling going on? Do you think they told these anomalies intentionally for people later to realize they were forced to take a version of the truth and plagiarize it for their own particular aims?
Oh, absolutely. I do think that, Gerald. I've always been perplexed, as I said, the Noah's Ark story, and I knew that from reading the first 5 books in Genesis, that was a extrapolation from information that is much, much, much older. I mean, you look at the story of Moses. I mean, that's a retelling. The story of Jesus.
But when did you realize it was a retelling? That's what I'm fishing for here. How did you get onto that?
The first time I think I realized it was a retelling of the story was probably the earliest time when I was really cognizant of that was probably 1998.
So it was just actually recently relative to when you were learning about these Bible stories, right? It took you a long time to go, wait, this may not be the absolute word of God the way I was taught, and probably you were in the part of the country you were in.
Well,
I was raised Southern Baptist. You were told
Mormon, so it's.
Oh, you were Mormon. You were raised Mormon.
Correct. I was born and raised LDS. So.
Okay, we'll talk a little bit about that and how that conditioned you relative to seeing this as another story. Because I know what the Southern Baptist perspective would be. I'm not sure what yours was.
Well, the Mormons believe in some pretty wild stuff. I mean, I was brought up and raised to believe that, I mean, anybody can just go, and I'm not going to teach Mormonism here, but anybody can go and read the doctrines, read the scriptures, read the Mormon stuff, and come up with a fantastic story. I mean, straight out of L. Ron Hubbard type of material. Gold is prevalent throughout all of the Book of Mormon and the Mormon scriptures. Gold is the most fundamental thing that they loved, worshipped, and it was used as a tool or as a conveying intermediary of information. One story particularly, when I was probably 10 or 12, that stuck in my mind, and then it was reiterated when I was a missionary down in the West Indies from 1985 to 1987 with the Mormon Church, was there's a story in the Book of Mormon about a small ball of curious workmanship about the size of between my hands. And this thing was a computer, it was a compass, it was a GPS device. And I've always thought that this had to be a GPS device because it was in front of these guys' tent, and it led them out of the Middle East right before King Nebuchadnezzar came in and took over. And they apparently sailed across the oceans, built the boat, sailed across the oceans, and they landed in America, Central America. And the most thing that blows my mind is because all of the stuff I've read about from Zecharia Sitchin, I've read every single one of his books. I've got them here on display, read every one of his books. And the main people in the Anunnaki, but they're called the Nephilim. There's a character, multiple characters, like in the Mormon scriptures, called the Nephites. They're N-E-P-H-I, which I think is a play of words, the Nephilim, and then they're the Nephites. I mean, if you read the Book of Mormon, I've read it multiple times and look for specific things. Like I look for military aspects, I look for command and control, government control, things like that. Reading each time for one particular avenue or another. And the book is bizarre. I mean, it's all over the map. It's crazy, but there's some validity there. Okay, and I'm not trying to prove LDS teachings to anybody because that's an individual thing. My goal and objective here is to try to understand it because I presented this stuff. I presented this material to the temple president in Seoul, Korea. I said, look, what is the deal with this stuff? He happened to be an archaeology professor from BYU on loan for his temple duties for 3 years. He told me, he said flat out, we cannot talk about this material, this stuff, we can't talk about it in the church. And I'm presenting him this, I'm talking about this guy named Marduk. I wanted to talk to him about it. I said, look, Marduk, the pyramids, I mean, if I remember correctly, Wars of Gods and Men, wasn't he in prison there or something like that? But I have multiple stuff in my head that I just wanted to come out. And the vehicle I think that I can bring it out in is a lot of the Mormon teachings that I can say, okay, teaching A is this, and then I can dovetail in some of the Anunnaki teachings from Sitchin and even from yourself. Because
I was going to ask you two things. You mentioned these beings that left with a ball of some sort of GPS device, that they went to the Central America. Do you remember when you thought that happened? Approximately the same time Columbus, or is it pre-Columbian?
No. According to the Mormon scriptures, according to the theology and the stories of this, it happened about 600 BCE.
Okay.
Now there was an earlier transfer of many people from the Middle East about 2500 BCE, and the Book of Mormon talks about that in just a very brief detail. Those fellows were called the Jaredites.
Jaredites, okay.
About them, I don't know, but I know that there's so much repetition, there's so much Anunnaki alien stuff that's imbued in the Mormon Church. I mean, I really firmly think that Enlil is in charge of it. I mean, I go to the temple over there, and the spirit on the grounds is like, okay, if Enlil was doing this, that's him.
Yeah, well, give me another couple names. Enlil, Enki. Do you see any evidence of any Enkyites, or is it all Enlilites in your mind?
I think it's all mixed. I think there's a lot of overlap. I think these guys play multiple roles, but I think probably we've got an 80% solution with Enlilites, an 80% solution with Enkyites, but there's a lot of overlap. There's cousins going back and forth. And these guys live forever relative to us.
Right.
And in the Mormon teachings, Gerald, there's a mathematical doctrine in the Doctrine and Covenants that talks about the time of God, the reckoning of the Lord. And and I did the math on it. I must defer to you because you're probably a lot smarter than me on these type of equations, but I did the rudimentary math, and it's the same as the sexagesimal system, okay? And it made me think, oh my God, this stuff is totally alien stuff. So I kept reading Mormon stuff to some degree, but I kept accelerating my Zecharia Sitchin research, knifing through it, just if I didn't understand it, I just kept going and going and reading it again, going to his seminar. I went to one seminar, a Sitchin seminar up in Dallas, Fort Worth in 2002, brought all my books. He signed every one of them, met him. Very humble guy, his wife, fantastic crew. It was a great meeting.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, I've always been curious about a couple of things about Mormonism. Two things. Number one, there was a Mormon temple very close to my house in San Diego, right on the Interstate 5. You know, it looked like a spaceship. It was an amazing building. And they built it new while I was there, so yeah. I watched the whole thing go up. Well, of course, they put this golden-colored angel with a trumpet facing to the east, and I asked, well, what is that? And found out it was the angel Moroni. And when I looked into that a little bit farther, it seemed like there was a connection between Moroni and Quetzalcoatl. And I was like, I need to ask somebody about this. It's been kind of a background research topic for me. What is your take on that? What is this symbolism of this particular angel? And do you see a connection between Mormonism and what happened in Mesoamerica in particular? I'm really focused on that, especially Quetzalcoatl.
I am too. I'm currently rereading the realms. What's it called? The fourth book that Sitchin wrote.
The Lost Realm.
The Lost Realms. I'm reading that. I'm stuck on one guy. I'm going to answer your question. I'm stuck on one guy, one researcher who I think has a lot of answers. He's long dead.
Yeah, that's it right there.
Fernando Montesinos. That guy's got some information, but we don't know where it is. It's locked up, I think, the Vatican because he was a monk. And but anyways,
and didn't BYU sponsor some archaeological explorations either at Giza or one of the temples of the sun? I want to say it was at Palenque or Teotihuacan. I can't remember.
I do believe they did. I know that they're very active in searching in South and Central America for evidences to support the validity of the Book of Mormon.
Well, this is why I'm asking, is because it looked like their focus was in Central and South America, and this is where I found this connection between the angel Moroni and Quetzalcoatl, and somehow, you know, it was the idea of a golden tablet, right, for Joseph Smith, whereas there was writings in the Emerald Tablets by Dorial that said that he was given the task to retrieve the Emerald Tablets from the Temple of the Sun. And he didn't exactly say whether it was the one like at Cusco in Peru or the big Temple of the Sun at Teotihuacan. And now that we're finding all these underground chambers and all these artifacts at Teotihuacan, a lot of us are believing that's where it was. And this was in 1925 when that happened, and then it was decoded. So the other date that I was trying to look for to see if the Mormons were involved in Central America was whether they somehow had a relationship with Enoch or the long count of the Maya. Do you have any idea about that?
I don't know that, but in the Pearl of Great Price, which is a Mormon piece of literature, Mormon scripture, they talk about Enoch being taken up into heaven.
Oh, really? Oh, yeah.
Joseph Smith himself was given apparent revelations to show this kind of stuff in the highest degree of glory, the heavens. There's gold everywhere. I mean, he even said he witnessed the throes of the celestial kingdom, and the streets are paved with gold. So gold is repeated throughout everything in the ancient scriptures, Sitchin stuff, and even in the modern stuff. I mean, Mormon stuff.
Yeah. Well, check this out. Consider the invasion of Mexico and Peru specifically to get gold in 1519 by Cortez. And I think it was a bit earlier for Pizarro in Peru. I have to look. No, it was after him. It came after him. He saw what Cortez did, then did the same thing about 11 years later, okay? So from 1519 to 1521, Cortez showed up in Veracruz, Mexico, looking for gold. And he met the representatives of the Maya and the king Montezuma, and these people actually gave Cortez, who had sailed from Cuba, on exactly the one reed year, which happened every 52 years in the Mayan calendar. So they thought he was Quetzalcoatl coming from the sea, right? Here they are giving him the outfit and the gold and all this stuff, thinking it was him returning because he said he'd come back every one reed year.
Yeah, isn't 52 Thoth's number also?
Well, that's a good point. So we know the angle of the Giza pyramid was 52 degrees. And if you look into the calendar that he introduced, 52 was a very important number because it related to the number of weeks in the year. If you used 4 cycles of 7 days each in the lunar calendar, which is where he ended up with a squabble, if you will, with Marduk in Egypt. What caused him to leave in the first place. You know, Marduk in the Wars of Gods and Men, as you mentioned, he ended up trying to assert himself 24 years too early to take over the Anunnaki Council, Lord of the Earth. That's what he wanted, right? You remember that circa 2000 BC. Well, because he did that, he got sent into exile, and he was entombed in the Giza complex where he was supposed to die. And that's where Ninmah showed up, ran intercession, and he was released from there because of her. But later on, Ninurta actually took over the Giza complex and took the crystals out and all this kind of stuff. Well, through all these wars and problems that were going on in Egypt, about 3113 BCE, this is when the Mayan long count started in Mesoamerica with the Olmecs, exactly August 13th for that matter. Well, that long count was very important for the Zolkin calendar, as was the 52 and the 20 count and the 13 and the 9 in the other calendars that they were using. So these numbers were real important. So the idea that 52 was so important to Quetzalcoatl, and it was Thoth's number, you know, this is how Sitchin and several of us other researchers in the lost realm put 2 and 2 together, that this same entity that was teaching calendar and language in Mesopotamia, and his number was 52, and in Egypt was the same one that ended up in Mesoamerica. So that's kind of you. So we're actually talking about that in one of our episodes for the Anunnaki series that's coming up.
Well, there's so much overlay. I mean, there's so much overlay. But going back to your first question, way back when, how I came into this stuff, as I said, I was into the Mormon stuff. A lot of the Mormon things, doctrines, seemed very alien in nature, by virtue of the devices that the Book of Mormon talks about. It's called a Leohana. That's what the device is, the GPS computer type thing. Joseph Smith found these golden plates with all the records of the Mesoamerican people that were living here for about 2,800 years. And it was buried in upstate New York. Mm-hmm. And then he came across them in 1823 or 1824, translated it into the book, what is now known as the Book of Mormon. And if someone, just read it. It's just so bizarre. There's so much stuff all over the map.
Do you recall what the language was originally written in that he had to translate it into?
He said it was Reformed Egyptian, which I don't know what that means. That could be just hey, I don't know what it is. I'm just going to call it something to appease potential scholars.
They may not have known what to call the Mayan codices by that time, because they had glyphs that looked very much like the hieroglyphs from Egypt.
Yeah, you're very right. That could be very true, and I bet you anything, there's some validity in that point.
But the reality is, could we actually decode it then? Because we didn't see the Mayan codices decoded until they found the sarcophagus stone at Palenque. And this was with David Stewart and Tatiana Peroshevich, these folks. And this was in the 70s, okay? So how did he decode this stuff? If it was, way back then, I don't know. I have no idea.
Well, he apparently used a Urim and Thummim, divining rods, and seer stones to decode, to translate this Book of Mormon. And I've read it, and just one time I read it, and I was looking for, okay, how can this guy put this book together? I mean, it's an insane book. There's stuff all over the map. It's not well written. It's very, very bizarre, but there's a lot of truth. There's a lot of things in it that really make me go, wait a minute. There's got to be some connection here to the stuff, okay? The Mormon stuff, the Nephilim stuff, but I can't. I'm either way ahead of people in the church, and they don't want it. They can't comprehend it, or the guys up top have told me, "Hey, shut up. We can't talk about this kind of stuff." Mm-hmm. So I don't know what it is. Only thing I can do is keep reading, keep thinking, meeting guys like you and Jay, and talking about it.
Yeah, well, I suspect if I had to go dig into this, and you may be the one to do this, people that got exposed to esoteric other cultural religions and things like that, they were generally either gypsies or they were connected to a secret society that was exposed to this. And listen, I think the time frames you're mentioning, I think the Masonic order was very strong in America. It was what year are you talking? 1785.
Well, Adam Weishaupt, is that his name?
Well, Weishaupt was 1776. So that's when the Illuminati were formed in Bavaria that ended up probably infiltrating the Masons and vice versa. You know, the Masons are probably infiltrating them too. So, but the idea of, I think it was 1785, something like that, if I remember, with Joseph Smith.
No, Joseph Smith is 1820.
Oh, 1820. Okay, well, still, we're in the time frame of the formation of the new nation. So that's possible. I don't know. I think if he was exposed to anything about Mesoamerican gods and Egyptian things, where else would he have gotten that stuff unless he was A, an archaeologist, or B, or an anthropologist, or he was involved with a secret society?
Well, there's a book written by a guy, I can't remember his name. It's called Early Mormonism and the Magic World View, written by a scholar, BYU professor, and he was kicked out of the Mormon Church for writing that book.
Well, that's the book you want to read then.
I did read it. I own it, and I've read it, dove into it extensively. That was a big inspiration for me for a lot of my thoughts and the direction I'm going in. His name's D. Michael Quinn. That's his name, D. Michael
Quinn. Okay.
Correct. And you know, he explored the early 19th century America, the time at Smith, where Smith was living. There was a lot of religious revivalism. There was a lot of, hey, join my faith. Hey, join this faith. You know, so there was a lot of competition. Remember, the only media they had was newspaper, and that was very probably sporadic and only in some of the urban centers of America then at the time. So, I mean, for Smith to see a vision 4 times in one night, it was repeated exactly, and he said it in his own journal. He said the vision occurred 4 times. Moroni, the guy on top of the temple, blowing the trumpet to the east, a golden statue, 9 feet tall, blowing the trumpet to the east. Moroni came to him 4 times in one night, repeated the same thing over and over again, verbatim, which told me that is probably a holographic projection, maybe from a repeater satellite in orbit somewhere out in space.
Yeah.
The Mormon planet where they believe, where faithful Mormons believe that God resides. I say God with a capital G, where the God of all resides is a planet. They believe it's a planet called Kolob. Now, if you go into the Battlestar Galactica models and in the lore of TV, even the old show and the new show, Battlestar Galactica, Glenn Larson was a Mormon. He wrote the scripts for that stuff, and he changed the name. He just did a little bit of reverse action. He changed the name of Kolob to Kobal. So the planet where the God lives is Kobal. So I was always wondering, is this possibly the planet called Nibiru or Planet X? So I've always been looking for this correlation to support each other.
Right. So in general, you're looking at the connections from what you learned about Sumerian history and their gods, the Anunnaki, to a connection in the Mormon religion in general. That's what you're doing.
That's exactly it.
Okay.
And the information that I have, or the information anybody has pertaining to the planet that God lives on, Mormons aren't going to just talk about this stuff because they're going to want to know who you are, why you're asking these kind of questions. Yeah. Even most Mormons in church are not going to always talk about it because it's pretty deep, heavy stuff. But that's where I've always been gravitated to. I want to know the real meat and potatoes of something because I can understand it. I don't know why. I can just get it.
I think just off the cuff, based on the questions you're asking, I think if you were to have read my books, you would be a little clearer on some of the labels that they use. For instance, Big G OD that I use has nothing to do with a being living on a planet, because when the 7th planet, Mercury rising, Thoth goes very deeply into who he believes the creator of all is, and this universal consciousness or universal mind. And it definitely is not represented by an incarnation in a body, or even localized through a planet. So that very well could have been Anu, like you're stating, if it was the planet Nibiru.
Yeah. Again, there's the more I learn, the more I have questions about. So I could amass all this information and then still not know anything. So
well, you may just want to pick one of them, like the idea of what did Moroni tell Joseph Smith verbatim. So look at that a little bit more closely, and I could possibly do the same. I'm relying on you to do it since this is your passion. And the second thing is focus on where BYU was doing their archaeological work. Where exactly were they looking? Because that's very telling about what they viewed as the source of the information that basically gave substance to their belief system. So, and I haven't done that, I have to be honest. So I know that's your passion and that's where you're going, but that's what I would do. And you know, there's probably lots of people who have written books about possibly this topic. I haven't searched for them, but I've always thought, you know, I found a basis for the Anunnaki in almost every civilization that's been started across the world, and pretty much every religion too. So, for instance, and this one may be shocking to you, is I have many references now that show that one of the Anunnaki was actually Jesus, and that was Thoth himself. So
I believe that, Gerald. I really do.
And now, listen, Thoth was also known as Quetzalcoatl in Mesoamerica. So if the angel Moroni had some connection to Quetzalcoatl, I'm interested in finding that out too, just so you know. Because the connection for me is Enoch. Listen, when Noah was born in the book of Enoch, it was a very unusual birth. Now, whether they were storytelling just to make it look fantastical, or it's real, they said the baby was born with blonde hair, blue eyes, had rosy-colored skin, and levitated and spoke at birth. Freaked his father Lamech out so bad he went looking for some answers because he didn't know how to deal with this. This is the biblical account, right? And so in that account, he started walking up the Adam to Noah hierarchy chain, starting from his father Methuselah and then backed up to his father Enoch, okay, who actually was the son of none other than who? Cain and Abel. So Cain was the son of Enki and we call her TT or Eve, the first bipedal hominid that they experimented with. And Cain was the offspring of that. And the Cain and Abel story, Cain kills Abel. Well, Cain turns out now he's half Anunnaki, if that's true. If his father was a full-blown Anunnaki and his mother was one of the primitive workers, well, so now, and Abel was born of the two primitive workers. So he had very little Anunnaki, kind of like we do, right?
Yeah.
And so this Cain was supposedly banished to the land of Nod, east of Eden, and by none other than Yahweh. Well, that was Enlil, okay? Right? So you have to ask yourself, if Cain was banished east of Eden and all of a sudden Lamech starts going up the hierarchy chain looking for Methuselah and he lands with Enoch. Well, Enoch was Cain's son who built a city for him while he was in exile. Well, guess where that was? Mesoamerica. Because that's where he went to find Enoch, who was there with the gods, living with the gods, right? Well, which ones were they? So in the Lost Realm, and I won't spoil the book for you.
No, I've read it, The Lost Realm. Yeah.
But one of the key connections you realize there was when Sitchin started taking apart the word Tenochtitlan, which was the Aztec capital. Well, it contains the name of Enoch in there, who was Cain's son, right? So is that the city that Cain built for his son Enoch, who we now know as Thoth? It's the same being. So now it's really thick, okay? So.
Oh, there's so much to really grasp on it. I mean, multiple people across the world have little bits and pieces to contribute to common knowledge. Mm-hmm. That's why, I found your stuff 3 or 4 months ago. I was outside doing some work, and I was like, "Holy shit, this is a guy that I can listen to." I mean, there's a lot of kooks out there, a lot of quacks. There's a lot of guys that think they know, but they don't have the depth to really dive into it.
Well, everybody needs a different level of substance in their diet. Hey, one thing that really comes, I wanted to ask you. So So you somehow knew through your Mormon exposure about this crazy link to potentially other extraterrestrial influences. Okay, let's put it that way. So now you end up in the military. I don't know what rank you were when you ended up in Iraq, but had you read Sitchin stuff before you landed in Iraq?
Yes, I started reading Sitchin stuff in 1998.
Okay.
So when I went to Iraq,
and you were in Iraq.
Right. By the time I had gone to Iraq, when I was in Iraq, I had already established a correspondence with Sitchin through the mail over many years. Since 2000 or 2001, I started a correspondence with him, and he wrote me back, which blew my mind. I was in Korea. We were writing to each other, and he was very general, very nice, very short in his answers. You know, he was glad that I'm one of his fans. And then I went to Iraq, and I wrote him a note, said, I'm going to Babylon, the ancient city of Babylon. I'm going to take tons of pictures. Would you like me to send them to you with a write-up? And he wrote me back. He said, please do. And then he wrote me back again after I sent him all the pictures and a 2 or 3 page write-up. He wrote me back and he said, can I please put this information on my website? And I said, yeah, by all means, go right ahead, Sitchin.com. And he did. I don't think it's there anymore because that was 2004.
Are these the pictures that you turned me onto on your Facebook page, or are they different?
No, they're the same ones.
Oh, yeah, fantastic set of pictures. And by the way, thanks so much for sharing them with me, because we included them in the first episode of the Anunnaki series, and I think they turned out really well. I think you saw that. Is that correct?
There were some in there, but I was expecting more. Because I had like 80 of them, but maybe it was the second one. That's why.
Well, we were focused on a couple of topics, so hopefully we'll get to use more of them.
Yeah, feel free.
Okay.
I'm on record. Use all the ones you want if you'd like to.
Okay, terrific. Yeah. And we gave you photo credit in there too, because I know that had to have been a very different experience being in Babylon, having read this stuff. I can't even imagine what must have been going through your head.
Gerald, I was all alone. I was with one other guy because we had to go battle buddy stuff, right? We were walking around in those ruins. Unhindered, unfettered access, go and do anything we wanted to. Digging around. I mean, there was these mounds of just debris, former homes, former palaces, just nothing there anymore. And they look like they have never been dug into or had any research done into them, dug under them and turned up the earth because of all the wars.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the calamity of the nuclear winter that blew over there when, outlined in the Wars of Gods and Men.
So of all the temples, I know there was a Ninurta temple and a Ishtar temple. Were any of those still standing that you were able to go see?
No, I wasn't able to decipher any of those. Now, we had a guide, an Iraqi guide he gave us the very rudimentary tour of the facility, but I knew more than this guy was talking about. I mean, that's fine, that's okay. I was asking him questions, and he did not know who Ninurta was, or of course he knew who Marduk was because it's illustrated.
Right.
Yeah, but he didn't know some of the other detailed stuff. He says, "Oh, just go look around." So I went in there, looked around, dug around, spent the entire day out there. Now it's a dangerous zone. I mean, we had to drive over there, and some of the Iraqi guys they were going like this.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Go by, we're going to kill you guys. We're going to get y'all.
Well, what did you think about the military going in and occupying the palace? I mean, I saw that and I was like, maybe it's symbolic, it's sending a message, but wow.
We occupied all of the palaces over there.
Yeah, I saw that. How'd that make you feel?
I felt like I was raping part of a rape gang, actually. It bothered me a lot that we even went there. I didn't like going there in the first place. We don't need to be doing this crap going over there. And he said, okay, noted, Sergeant. And I was like, okay, got my orders. I'll go ahead and go.
It's like that. I know. You and I are Army buddies that way. I spent 7 years in the Army, and I actually was in Korea too. Where in Korea were you?
I was in Seoul, right in Yongsan.
Oh, really? I actually spent some time down at Yongsan at Hotel 201 because we That's what we would fly in and out of going up to Chuncheon, which, by the way, that Camp Page where I was is closed down now. It's not there anymore.
Oh, things changed quickly. I mean, it's not that many soldiers there as there was 15, 20 years ago. Same thing in Germany. So I was bothered by the Iraqi debacle. Going in there, it's like, we're doing something wrong. We shouldn't have been doing that. But I did do it. I drove all the way from Kuwait to Baghdad. And I
drove. That's quite a drive.
It took about a day and a half.
Did you have any interest in seeing any of the other sites like Ur or Nippur, Sapar, or Ridu, or Rook, any of those on the way up? Or was it far out of the way?
I did have the interest. In Desert Storm back in '91, I went to Ur with a chief warrant officer.
No kidding.
But yeah, in 1991. But at the time, I had no appreciation for it. But he did. He did. He was a former Mormon bishop, and he was telling us about what this land was and this and that. And by this time, I mean, the smoke fires of the oil wells were pretty prevalent everywhere. So, I mean, I was 24, newly married. The only thing I was concerned with was getting out of there and staying alive.
Yeah.
The car when you get home, that kind of stuff.
Sure.
So I didn't really appreciate it. But going up into Iraq again in 2003 or 2004, I would have liked to have done it, but I couldn't have broke convoy to go explore on my own.
While you were there, did you come across any interesting experiences being told, go in this ziggurat, get this, go in this museum, take this out, any of that kind of stuff that you had to be involved with or not?
No, I wish I was, because if I was told to go into those museums and quote, guard or loot, I wouldn't have participated in that. They need smart guys. They need those museums were looted and stuff was taken. Perhaps maybe some magical destiny things, things for understanding this realm. Stuff is gone, and I don't think it's reappeared yet on the market.
Well, you realize in '91, according to Dr. Michael Salla, in his exopolitics paper he wrote, Saddam Hussein, who believed he was a reincarnation of Nebuchadnezzar, was down clearing the very large engineering project down in Uruk, where he was draining the river area, and if there was any marsh or reed area, he was trying to get that cleared out. And they were doing this because they wanted to excavate Gilgamesh's city. And a lot of people believed he was looking for some sort of chamber, some sort of portal that would allow him to reincarnate beings that they didn't want him to do. And that had a lot to do with the reason they invaded in 1991. So here he was doing this project while he's being invaded, and he was still going on while he's being invaded by the United States. I was like, wow, that's crazy. And he had a team of German magnetometers operators come in and map out the whole underground area of Uruk. They were looking for Gilgamesh's grave, which, by the way, in 2003, the BBC came out and said later on, okay, because there was 91 with the incursion, and then what was it, 2003? It was another one?
2003.
Storm and then Desert Shield, or whichever way they were. So all of a sudden, the BBC comes out, hey, we found Gilgamesh's grave in the city of Uruk, right where Saddam Hussein was over here digging, So there were coincidences that really triggered me as well. Like, what are they really there looking for? And whether it was cuneiform tablets, bodies for genetic studies, or a portal of some sort, who knows? Or a spacecraft, God, who knows? They were very sophisticated, and we don't really know the full extent of it.
Well, you got to remember, Gerald, I was probably the only soldier walking around that entire base camp that knew anything about what was the ground.
How did that? I bet you felt like an alien, didn't you?
Well, totally, because
I'm not talk to anybody about it either, could you?
No, couldn't tell a soul, because I had probably 15 years. Probably not so much, not 15 years, but a good 8-9 years of research under my belt at that time. So I couldn't tell anybody about that. I mean, the only person I could tell was Sitchin, and he was very interested.
Yeah. Well, he was even in that situation when he was at his, I don't know, I wouldn't call it his prime, but probably in the late 80s, early 90s. You know, he met with Dr. Harrington in 1990. Well, right in between that area.
Yeah, the Naval Observatory, right?
Yeah, in August of 1990. So about that time, he was out in the public with what he was talking about. But he wasn't like a prolific lecturer where he was out, you know, touching flesh with a lot of people. He was a little more academic than that. And actually, he was very reserved because I think from a religious standpoint, he was very concerned about exposing his research and the backlash he would get from the world's religions, you know. and you could see that in his behavior too, and in his writings.
Well, Sitchin was a very humble man. He was very quiet, very, very small voice, very short sentences. He didn't really give full answers.
Well, that's what I mean. And you know, take a person like that and put him on the lecture circuit, and that's not their gig, right? And he was like that. I could tell. Yeah. Yeah.
No, you need somebody that can speak better and captivate an audience. Sitchin didn't have that.
Right. And I think that's a large part. Not that that was bad. A lot of academics are like that. I even haven't done a bit of that, but that because of that, I think was one of the reasons why he had to defend himself so much, and really got lambasted even when he died. Is that, you know, people just wanted to make him wrong, you know.
Yeah, but
he wasn't around to defend himself. He was an easy target.
But the whole Sitchin is wrong crowd is ridiculous because
I know. I don't even want to go there.
Nothing. There's no counteroffer. Sitchin has the material that by itself will stand the test of time. They offered nothing except saying he's wrong, and it was a frivolous argument.
I know. I actually don't want to go there. It makes me quite upset when I hear dead heroes disparaged. I don't care if they were right or wrong. You know, you have to ask yourself, okay, say they were 85% right. And by the way, in this order of reality, I don't think any of us ever gets even close to 100% truth in our life. You'd be lucky to get, you know, 40, 30, 40%. I don't know. You know what the number is? 5? Maybe so.
5%,
but whatever it is you're getting, the idea of taking someone else and going, well, you might have made a mistake here, so you're completely wrong. That's just throwing the baby out with the bathwater. And it was done intentionally to make his stuff go away for the same reasons you experienced with your church, okay? This was very uncomfortable stuff, and it starts affecting the New World Order and the powers that be control structure over the humans when you start dealing with politics and religion, right?
We've got a current battle right now today, as you know.
Well, tell me about it. I don't really stay in touch with U.S. politics because I don't live there anymore. I kind of peek in every once in a while, but I have so much disdain for people who think they're supposed to be governing other people in the first place. So tell me.
I'm not speaking of Trump or Clinton.
Oh, you're not? Okay, yeah.
No, I'm speaking bigger. I'm speaking bigger terms than that. I mean, the new economic order called BRICS that Putin.
Oh, sure, yeah.
That's a huge shot across the bow of every Navy aircraft carrier we have.
Mm-hmm.
And it's an effective shot. Saddam Hussein took Iraq off of the dollar, the U.S. dollar, in 1999 or 2000 as a result of us putting sanctions on Iraq. He took his oil off the dollar.
Did it happen before 1991 with the invasion? Wasn't that related to him leaning toward the dinar?
No, I'm talking about in the year 2000. About the year 2000, Saddam took his oil off of being traded with American dollars, which pissed off everybody in the West because he could do it, everybody else could do it. So it created a huge problem for the West. The French were very happy because Saddam said, I will choose to trade my oil in euros, which only existed on a computer screen. It was not real money.
Right.
Well, the Europeans were very happy about that, and I think that was the real reason why we went into Iraq. And trust me, I was playing football with guys with sacks of $100 bills. I mean, this money was being flown into the country. There was no accountability. Well, there was some accountability, but there was really not much. You know, a stack of $10,000 bills is about this tall. That's about as tall as a stack of $10,000 bills. And that's, gone, So there was football being played with this money that was flown in there, hundreds of billions of dollars of American currency to bring Iraq back up put it back into the dependency on the oil dollar.
Mm-hmm.
And I always thought that was the reason why we did go in. And then the guys in Israel, they were probably hungry to get in there and raid the Museum, and take stuff back that they wanted because they knew what they wanted. I mean, it was very well researched. They knew what they wanted when they got it.
Okay. Well, I think for our first interview, I think we got enough material.